Hello, everyone. I have a remarkable guest today, Dr. Yasir Gökçe, a former Turkish diplomat and a scholar focusing on international law. Welcome to my show, sir.
Hello. Thanks for having me here.
You're welcome. Dr. Gökçe, you have co-authored a very interesting report last month titled Crimes Against Humanity Case of Gülen Group. So this report was published by Institute D, I guess. So can you please give us some information about the institution and the contents of this report, please?
Yeah, of course. Thanks again for having me. It's a pleasure to be your guest here.
Thank you so much.
Institute is a Brussels-based NGO. It is established in Brussels. Institute for Diplomacy and Economy. A group of former diplomats established this institution to cover foreign policy matters, issues, and to document and evidence to the extent possible the human rights violations in Turkey. And economical matters are also within the purview of our institution.
So what was the focus of the most recent report that you co-authored?
It is on crimes against humanity nature of the property rights violations in Turkey. That means the confiscations, seizures, expropriations are all named as property rights violations against the group, Gülen Group, and the individuals affiliated with that group. The properties belonging to the group and belonging to the individuals linked or affiliated with the group were seized by the Erdogan government. And we analyzed those property rights violations within the framework of international law governing the international crimes. And we concluded that those violations amount to crimes against humanity in our report.
Right. And how many people are we talking about here that was targeted with this issue?
Yeah, that's a fair question. There are almost 200,000 people.
200,000 people.
Yeah, correct. Whose jobs are taken away, who lost their jobs, who lost their licenses, professional, occupational licenses, whose properties, whose rights are restricted with court orders. And there are many ways to restrict or to remove property rights of those individuals. Throughout the report, we analyzed different categories of those violations.
Right.
And we scrutinized those violations under the law governing crimes against humanity.
So can you please tell us how the Turkish government is justifying these confiscations?
Yeah, of course. There are a number of justifications, pretexts that are advanced by the government. First of which being the terrorism charges against those individuals. The pretext of those properties having been allocated for the purpose of terroristic objectives. In other words, they are used to further the objectives of terrorism. Is one of the justifications, or it is being earned thanks to the activities of terrorism is also a justification. And some of the appropriations or confiscations didn't need any justification at all.
I see.
Some are confiscated, or for example, schools, institutions, or media agencies are shut down without any probable or plausible reason at all, ground at all.
Okay, can you please tell us your findings? So, and you are titling this, you are framing it as crime against humanity. So, what are your legal base for this analysis?
Yeah, of course. First, it might be questioned what has property rights to do with human rights or crimes against humanity. We found a nexus in the Rome Statute. The pertaining law governing international crime here are the Rome Statute and the case law, especially pronounced by International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia, International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, Akayasu judgment, for example. All these case law we scrutinized and extracted the relevant criteria, and the Rome Statute, and the elements of the crime are as follows. First of all, there has to be violations, the existence of violations. What differentiates ordinary violations from crimes against humanity is the fact that they have been committed in a systematic and widespread manner and against a certain civilian group. Then you can dub this as crimes against humanity, those violations. It is beyond doubt that in our case, there are violations. There are huge violations. There are severe violations whose violations nature are substantiated through international courts, through UN bodies, United Nations Human Rights Council, United Nations Committee on Arbitrary Detention, European Court of Human Rights, and many semi-judicial mechanisms, Turkish tribunal. Such semi-judicial mechanisms established the violation character of those acts, those practices of the Erdogan government, those confiscations. And we scrutinize in our report the systematic character and the widespread character. In numerous findings of the UN bodies in decisions which are pronounced in respect of individuals affiliated with the Gülen movement, the systematic and widespread character were being pointed out. The court literally said those violations are of a repetitive nature, are of continuous nature, and so severe that their systematic and widespread character can be deduced. So we have these findings in numerous decisions of UN bodies to that extent. And in current decision of the European Court of Human Rights, the landmark Yalçınkaya judgment, the court said the problems that we point out in this decision are systemic in nature. They also point out the systemic nature of those violations. So we have a pattern here in the way in which those violations are being committed. And we studied what makes a violation a systematic. And we extracted a number of criteria, and we applied those criteria to the violations, and we established, substantiated, and underlined the systematic nature of those violations first, then the widespread nature of those violations. That's the methodology that we followed throughout this report.
So when you followed these principles and steps, you have concluded that what the Turkish government has been doing to the members of the Gülen movement by confiscating their assets and houses and bank accounts So you concluded that what they had been doing was a crime against humanity.
That's correct. Exactly.
Mhm. I understand. So do you have any friends whose assets or houses were confiscated? You were a Turkish diplomat. Were you also subject to these accusations? Were you also labeled as a terrorist by the Turkish government, sir?
Yeah, of course. The reason I was dismissed with a presidential decree,
Right.
which emphasized that they did this practice on the ground of me or the group of people being affiliated to a terrorist organization. That's correct.
Right.
Yeah.
These accusations, are not limited to the people, who were in Turkey, after the coup attempt. But for example, I've been living in the United States almost for 17 years. I have many other journalist friends living in different countries. They also were subject to these accusations, and their assets also were being confiscated. So what do you suggest? I mean, what do you think that these people should do to seek for their rights against these violations?
Yeah, that's a fair question. It's really not possible to find a remedy against your damage, against those violations. I suggest that the people who are able to pursue their cases in Turkey do so. They should hire a lawyer and they should initiate a legal proceeding against their damages in an effort to extract a compensation. They should initiate civil proceedings. They should advance their damages or rights before their criminal proceedings, so that they got documented there, so that the European Court of Human Rights won't say that it is the first instance that you bring those assertions to me. You should have followed your case first in the first instances. Right. In the second instance, you cannot use me as the first instance.
I see.
In order for the court to eliminate those grounds of rejection, they should pursue their cases first in national courts, in domestic courts.
Okay. Are there any cases in the European Union courts right now related to these confiscation issues? Do you know anything about this?
As far as I know, I don't know any proceedings being initiated before those courts. No, I don't know.
Okay, but this is what you suggest. First, they should initiate these legal procedure in Turkey, and then it's obvious that they will not find any solution in Turkey, and then they will have to take it to the European Court of Human Rights. Yeah. Okay, Dr. Yes, please go on.
One thing I can add is we can draw lessons learned from these incidents. What does that mean? Yes. We can try to establish in every commercial transaction an access and affiliation to the abroad, so that the jurisdiction of foreign courts can be invoked in case of disputes. What does that mean? Any transaction, any establishment of corporations should authorize, in case of disputes, the foreign courts or World Trade Organization or international tribunals, so that we don't have to rely on the mercy of the domestic courts, having heavily been influenced by the Erdogan government.
Dr. Gökçe, I have another question. How did you find out that these procedures were systematic in nature?
Yeah, of course. As I said, we studied those violations and we extracted the criteria from the case law on systematic nature of those violations. the crimes against humanity. And there are some steps, or there is a methodology to that end. And the case law says, first of all, there has to be a predefined state policy to that extent, a predefined state policy. And this policy should be executed with the means of state machinery, and the public resources should be allocated for the execution of those policy, and it has to be in a repeated and continuous nature.
And this is happening. This is happening all the time.
Yeah, we applied those criteria to the case here, to the violations, and we found a pattern here. And the pattern is as follows. First of all, the government has a deprivation policy in this case. It's ostensibly, it says that I am combating against terrorism, but they are also targeting the means, the financial means of ordinary citizens, ordinary individuals. That goes beyond the objective of combating the terrorism. What I mean with this, first and foremost, they attacked the properties of the Gülen group as a whole. When there is no properties, when there are no wealth which is available to loot for, then they divert their attention to the individuals. Let me give some examples. The steps that we analyzed in this scrutinize. In 2014, an amendment was promulgated in private tuition center law, and the private tuitions which belong or which are somehow affiliated with the movement were shut down. It was then annulled or turned down by the constitution, but it was too late for them to reopen again. First step. The second one, the solution of Bankia. First, the government ordered the public institutions not to transact using Bankia. They terminated their contractual relationships with the bank. The influential figures retrieved their deposits from the bank, and at the end, there were some flimsy pretexts that there were some missing signatures, or the quorum for decision making were not met, so that those grounds were taken to dissolve, to shut down the bank. Third step, criminal peace judgeships. They are authorized by the government to activate the Article 133. They allow to appoint trustees to the companies so that they can run and govern the private companies the way they want. They did that, and they appointed trustees to numerous companies, corporations, institutions, Kaynak Holding, and the corporations of Akınipek, the corporations of Boydak, etc. And they instrumentalized criminal peace judgeships to that extent. And they enacted a presidential decree so that the administrative, financial, and criminal responsibilities stemming from their acts can be absolved. They don't have any responsibility for their acts that they disposed within the framework of state of emergency.
Okay.
And
yes,
it goes on and on. Instrumentalization of the Savings Deposit Insurance Fund, TMSF, Kaynak Holding were confiscated, forced closure of Feza media and the censorship. Then thousands of institutions confiscated after the declaration of the state of emergency. The private educational institutions, the institutions destined for educational purposes, the number is around 1,500. This is more than the schools established in Berlin. This is about the same number of schools in London. This is 1/3 of the schools in Paris. This is half of the number of the schools established in Washington. This is huge.
Yes.
All these educational institutions were shut down. Then the schools abroad were taken over by Maarif Foundation, as you know. 234 schools were taken over by this foundation. And last but not the least, the property rights of ordinary individuals were violated and restricted with the pretext of dismissals, with presidential decrees. They lost their jobs, they lost their vested pension entitlements, they lost their occupational permits and licenses. They lost. They couldn't have their passports. They had their travel bans. They couldn't find a job abroad because even if they they were not able to travel there. And the social security records are tainted with the phrases terrorists, so that the prospective employers are intimidated, so that they don't hire them after their dismissals. These are the methods employed, and this pattern and the way in which this policy is executed shows the systematic nature of those violations.
What about, my last question, sir, what about the widespread nature of these crimes? What can you tell us about this?
Yeah, of course. Widespread nature is evidenced by the geographical scope, the multiplicity of victims, their attribution to the group, and the identical nature of those investigations. That means the practices, the heinous practices committed in Antalya are the same with the ones in Van, are the same with the ones in Hakkari. They don't differ, they don't differentiate. And the total value of properties amount to $50 billion so far. And the number of institutions shut down are huge, as I just said. And the number of individuals against whom criminal proceedings are initiated amount to 1.5 million. This is huge.
Yes.
This is huge. And this shows the multiplicity criteria. This shows the identical nature of those investigations, the variety of the victims spread throughout Turkey and abroad. So they point out to the widespread nature of those violations.
Dr. Gökçe, thank you so much for joining me today. It was really stimulating for us. Thank you so much again.
Thanks for having me.